Good evening. Hey, hey. How are you guys doing? I hope you're so awesome. Thank you so much for logging in. Today is our very last episode of the series brought to you by Batswadi magazine. And it's really been such a great journey getting to engage with all of you on the different subjects that we've covered, especially related to parenting. When I think back to our first episode with Lynn Forbes talking about blended families, and then we moved on to the group of amazing support system that one can outsource, and the ladies came through. We were with Tina, Linda, and Ayanda just speaking about all the different kinds of support you can get. And then we also were with Dr. Frank Magwegwe talking about investing for your children. So today on this final episode, we're speaking about co-parenting, which I think is quite a big one. We touched on it a little bit with Lynn Forbes. And I think, you know, many of the principles that she mentioned are so relevant and apt for our conversation today. But I'm very excited because we're going to be speaking to a psychologist, author, and really I would consider her an advocate for children and children's best interests and well-being. And there are many situations where that can arise where parents of a child find themselves not being together. When they are together, I mean, it's got its own complications as well. But now, when you're not a couple, how is it that you navigate looking after the interests of the child while you might be dealing with a person who's not coming to the table, while you might be dealing with animosity, you might be dealing with a broken heart because this person, you might have been married to them for a period of time and now it's over. And I think it's important we touch on the absolute realities, because it's easy to say, oh, the best interests of the child. But how exactly do you do that? How do you navigate that when in a day, when it comes to parenting, there are multiple little decisions that need to happen, not just big decisions that two people sit at a table and say, let's do this for our child. So I hope all of you already want to ask questions, participate, or maybe even share your own stories. But on that note, let us bring our guest on. She is a psychologist and she is an author here. And I'm very excited just to get her input, especially from the perspective of an expert who's been doing what she's been doing, dealing with these type of cases. Carol, how are you doing? Welcome. Thank you so much for coming through.
Thank you, dear. I'm so grateful that I am your final guest. It's such an important topic.
Very, very important. And I mean, generally in an ideal world, people don't necessarily plan to have kids outside of any kind of a family unit, though with the way the family structures are changing, many people do opt to have children with an arrangement. Either way, whether they were together and they parted, or it was a one-night stand, or they decided we're of age, let's have a child together but not be together. There are so many scenarios where this conversation is obviously extremely relevant and extremely important. And I think the way the world is at the moment is that it is structured to support the family structure, but we now need to find tools to deal with structures that don't look like what we grew up being conditioned to know a family to look like, which is a child who is 50% DNA of one parent, 50% DNA of another parent, and then them coming together. And even then, it isn't always biological, because you look at Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt, he adopted some of the kids, so he still has all those parental responsibilities and obligations. Those are his children.
Absolutely. It is so rich and complex nowadays, as you've unpacked a little bit there. And I think in South Africa, we've just also got, the diversity within cultures, the different norms that we're dealing with, and the different perceptions that, as you rightly said, as kids, we grew up with this, happy family ideal, perhaps, or we grew up with, very, very different formats of family. And we haven't even touched on, same gender families and the challenges that go through in those families when they split. So it's just a very rich topic. There's so much we actually can take from putting the child's, I know you kept saying that in the intro, putting the child's best interests at heart.
Maybe let's start at the point of what exactly is co-parenting. And people, I think, have an idea of what it is, but sometimes, and I've found seeing on social media, that so many people were raised in such unhealthy homes that when they see healthy co-parenting, they assume, oh, they must still want to be together. For example, they cannot fathom that two people that are not in a relationship can raise a child together, get along, maybe even be friends. So would it be accurate to say that, many people are so accustomed to unhealthy relationships around them that when they see a healthy co-parenting relationship, it looks abnormal?
Yes, absolutely. And this is the worst unfortunate thing for the child, is that society almost expects that divorce has to be this terrible, acrimonious, conflictual thing, and that the exes will not get on. In South Africa, I think we're a little bit behind from the States, where they have long ago been working with conscious uncoupling, where you consciously decide to uncouple, and they're not even wanting to call it divorce. And there's courses you can go on, and there's actually a conscious uncoupling book. And in that, I was fascinated when I first uncovered in that book, actually, that our whole nervous system gets very triggered into defense when we split. Whether we were actually married, whether we were together for a lifetime or a year, whether we just raised a child together, there is this nervous system neurology. And we could look at that, coming way back, instinctual, I suppose, to protect one's young, and then also to sort of defend against this other. And we know our parents and our friends always get involved too, And actually, there's a new way. There's a more gentle, kinder way where, yes, it's going to be painful. You have to work through that. But actually that you can decide quite calmly and consciously, like you would in a business, that this is now going to dissolve, and this is how we're going to do it. And this is the parenting plan, and this is how we're going to move forward. Obviously, it takes a tremendous amount of awareness and dedication for that approach. However, more and more
maturity,
huge maturity,
yeah.
And more there are people getting it right. And I think the examples of people getting it right are wonderful.
Yes.
And give us a lot of hope.
Yes, definitely. I also think, sometimes, and I hope we're going to touch on it at some point in our conversation, that when we think family and co-parenting, there are also those units. For example, if a mom dies in a home, and now the mom's mom, the grandmother, takes shared responsibility with the father. So there's also the dynamics of a co-parenting arrangement where it isn't with your ex or somebody you consummated anything with. It is with somebody who's a generation above you.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So co-parenting in the nuts and bolts of it is parenting a child together but apart. You are apart. You're not living in the same place. You're not intimate in your relationship no longer, but your parenting is together. You are parenting the child together. Now, obviously, there's various formats, like you say, that takes. And in many, many cases in the real world, we know that it's often one-sided. We often have a mom who wants to co-parent and who would love the dad to see the child more, for instance, and it's just not happening. So is that actually still co-parenting? Or is that, is it that now the mom is actually sole parenting, but the father's just coming in here and there? So there's all these
freelance parent. He's a freelance parent. He's
A freelancer, yes. And
part-time.
I've often said to parents, "Oh, you mean the father's more like an uncle," you know, and in some children's lives, that's the sad reality, that their father might be more like an uncle figure in terms of contact and access, and even in terms of emotionally knowing their fathers or mothers. And I know I'm saying fathers here, but it can, of course, go in all sorts of ways.
Yes. So let's pick up now that we have clearly, and my apologies, my dog there's obviously something going on outside that is barking mad. But we've covered the co-parenting. Now I want us to look at the scenario of the starting point of the people who didn't know each other prior. So let's assume it was a one-night stand or a Tinder hookup, people are free to do what they want to do. And now the woman is pregnant and she doesn't know this person. Maybe she doesn't even know his name. She just referred to him on her phone as guy at the bar. And now she has to say, there's a kid on the way, I'm keeping it. And he says, okay, cool, I'm going to be on board, but we don't know each other at all. And they agree that there isn't actually any chemistry. We're not trying to do anything. So let's talk about the scenario of the two people who now want to co-parent, but they don't know each other from a bar of soap. Where do they begin?
Well, I think you've already unpacked it slightly, is that the commitment. They've begun with a commitment. If the other guy in the bar says he's in, that is already a start. That is a commitment. And, so they would have to begin.
The commitment is we both want to raise this child together.
We both want to raise
we agree.
Child. Yes, and we agree we're going to raise this child together. Now, obviously, if there hasn't been a long-term relationship or any relationship, there's no marriage, then they need, they need to put some ground rules in place. How are we going to do this? And in some ways, this is going to sound crazy, but in some ways, people who don't know each other much at all can in some way have a better co-parenting situation, because they don't have those value clashes and all sorts of intimate relationship challenges that then affect the actual business of parenting. So having said that, that's sort of a very radical thing to say. I'm sure I'm going to get lots of comments. Let's go back to the fact that it's not going to be easy. And I think what we all need to acknowledge is that no format of parenting is easy. So when you co-parent, there's going to have to be a plan in place. It's sort of almost like a strategy, like access. And of course, even if it's a different kind of couple, there's usually in a split, a parenting plan, which social workers can help, or a psychologist who deals with families can help you set up. And in a parenting plan, it's things like contact. How much are we going to each see this child? Where will they live? Primary residence. Who will be the main caregiver? What will we do for holidays? That's all to do with the access. Then there will be joint decision making around education, medical needs, psychological needs. So there's a lot that can literally be unpacked in headings. And of course, the biggie, financial. What is going to be the financial co-parenting arrangement?
And I'm glad you mentioned financial loss, because we do have individuals who say, I acknowledge that's my child. For example, the man would say, that's my child, but I want no part of it. So they even commit to just the financial part. There are many, be it he had an extramarital affair and he says, I want no part of this, but I'll send you money every month, which in itself, the commitment is maybe a part commitment, but is not the whole co-parenting commitment.
Yes, for sure. And for some people, again, that might be preferable. I mean, guy in the bar might not be the kind of person we want as the co-parent raising this child emotionally, but we definitely might want that support, on a financial level. So I think it goes right back to what you said. We have an idea. We really have an idea of what we think things should be like. And, if I could just put one message out there for this evening, it is step away from your idea and step into the child's being, into the child's heart, the child's little world. Really even go down on to their level and see what the world looks like. And then we can start unpacking, okay, now what is this child needing from parents?
I think a very powerful thing you said, very, very powerful, is that sometimes you don't want the person actively in a child's life. And I think many a time when the conversations are around, oh, this person's a deadbeat dad, or, you know, the mom is not even being present. And it really could be a blessing in disguise. And I understand, you know, as the parent that is the one with the child, you can see where a child is yearning for their mom or their dad, and you will do your best to fight for them to want to be involved and want to be in their lives. So much so that we ignore all the red flags that are saying, don't have this person in your child's life. So the question I want to ask is, what is that barometer that a parent should use? And I think some people get it right at the beginning, because they know during pregnancy, this person is not here. I'm on my own and I'm going to show up as presently as I can. I'm not going to actively pursue having this person in this child's life. What would you say those red flags are that a person should look out for? That, yes, maybe we have great sex, maybe it's fun to go on dates, but maybe you're not a person I want to be raising a child with.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to start with a quote from Maya Angelou, that amazing, amazing poet. She says,
I know what you're going to say.
When people show you who they are, you know,
believe them the first time.
And I'm speaking from personal experience. In my first marriage, would you believe he said, I will never be a good parent and I cannot be a faithful, good husband. And I didn't believe him. He spelled it out. So, you know, the behavior.
We never want to believe.
We don't want to believe. We always look for the good in the person, or we try and, you know, the romance and the heightened in loveness can make us blind to some very telling factors. Are they consistent? Do they show up for you? Because if they don't show up for you, answering your texts, saying they're going to be somewhere and they are, if they're not showing up for you in the relationship, how are you going to expect them to show up for their child? So showing up, you know, being solid, like really consistent. Consistency with children is kind of, I just say that word almost 10 times a day. We need the person to mean what they say what they mean, and do what they say. And that is, for me, the biggest red flag.
I would add to that, a person whose obviously their words align with their actions and that has follow through.
Absolutely. And then another challenge, and I really don't want to marginalize this mental health issue, but I just think personally, I have seen this so often. Another challenge, if you're in the guy in the bar scenario or thinking about getting into this relationship because you want to have children, is just look out for substance challenges and addictions. Because unfortunately, that, as beautifully meaning as these people are in their challenge, in that mental health challenge, they cannot, through that mental illness, they cannot be consistent easily. They cannot show up, and they often are going to put that addiction ahead of you and the child.
And of course, the big one is anybody who has been abusive to you in any way.
Absolutely.
That is the biggest, you know, be it physical, emotional.
That goes without saying.
Yeah, and I mean,
yes, it's important.
I always, you know, some people will say things like, yeah, he's a terrible partner, but he's a great dad. And then I will be like, okay, do you think it is being a great father, having your child watch his mother being ill-treated? Is that being a good parent?
Absolutely. And yes, you know, we all have facets to ourselves, and we do show up differently in different situations. And goodness me, of course, as moms, we can lose it too, and we can make many mistakes. It's just, you know, as you say, if they're not going to show up and be consistent, if they being one way with you, but a completely another way with someone else, that's quite a telltale sign that things are not going to be smooth sailing. But if we go
Yes.
to co-parenting, just back to co-parenting in general, and we go away from the one night guy in the bar, I see so many families where, you know, we talk in psychology's terms of attachment theory, where children really
Yes.
are attached to dad and mom. Mom and dad have raised them, or mom and mom, dad and dad, whichever variation, but there's attachment. There's incredible connection and attachment to these caregivers that have raised them. And then a year, 4 years, 10 years, 5 years down the line, it doesn't work out. And they are forced to co-parent, or they find themselves in that co-parent situation. And, you know, that, wow, the main two, I want to just say there's two big principles that would be amazing take-homes from tonight. The one take-home is minimize the harm to the child in whatever way you can. And we can unpack harm if you want to go there, but minimize the harmful effect of this very big split, this very big decision. And the second principle is enhance the good. Enhance the good in the relationship that you have with your child, the relationship that the child has with the other parent. Whatever you've got going for you, work it. Because with a strengths-based approach, children soon learn this resilience. Well, look, you know, mom and dad can't be together, but, you know, they can still, and it's such an amazing life lesson for them to learn, but they can still care enough for me that their stuff doesn't have to get so absolutely heated and awful.
And I mean, in terms of what you're sharing of parents splitting, already the fact that one parent will no longer be full-time in the home can be extremely traumatic. We all recall the episode of Oprah where she wanted to truly demonstrate what the impact of divorce on children is and how they carry that burden on themselves. Hence, we know that even when you come to communicate to them about the split, it needs to be as a united front.
Absolutely, absolutely. And really to minimize harm would also be to, like you say, to be united, to plan ahead before you just blurt out something to the child, you know, to have these conversations, to even have this parenting plan, you know, to have something in place that, you know, okay, this is going to be the access arrangement, this is going to be the financial, this is how we're going to navigate these things. And a lot of child-centered therapists, we work with the concept of that it's basically not negotiated, but very much literally child-centered. We want to have the child in the center of these decisions to the extent that we can. You know, obviously you can't, like you said, if there's been violence or there's been abuse, you can't put yourself back into that damaging relationship. But you put your child's needs up front, and how are we going to minimize that harm? Now, you know, being in different homes, there's going to be preparing them ahead of time for, okay, we've got 2 more sleeps, then it's daddy's turn. You know, many things can be minimized, changes for a child. I found this a lot in COVID. If we just give them preparation in words ahead of time and over, we repeat it. And really, it's so important to not just say something once or twice, but to ask them back. So when are we going to go to dad? When are you going to dad again? You know, really for them to actually grasp something, they need it repeated and they need to be able to kind of reason and tell it back to you.
And obviously, you know, if we had hours and hours to have this conversation, we could even go deep into dealing with the different age groups.
Yeah.
So for now, our conversation is quite generic because you do have the kids who are like, you guys should have done this forever ago and gotten a divorce. We're so sick
the
of
kids
your...
that tell them, please get divorced nowadays.
There are those kids who are like, oh, I'm so glad you guys got divorced because we can't stand the arguing, we can't stand the this. So there are it's not always this terrible heartache for some. Sometimes for kids, it's a massive relief.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, you know, I think if parents can just see it as we are changing our format of relating as partners, we are now going into the business of co-parenting, then the child is at the center. Ask yourself, would you shout at your boss or your colleague? You know, would you put the phone down on them? Would you not show up when you meant to? So if one took one's own emotion out, which is so hard, and by the way, definitely try and go for your own help to get over the split and all of that. That's such a given. But if you had to see your raising of children, your co-parenting as a business, with literally an agenda. I mean, I have parents that literally meet up in a neutral place once a month with an agenda of how, now they're going to talk about Sipu and Sizwe and, you know, the holiday planning. And it's not, it doesn't have to be best friends, like amazing, but it's just cordial and civil and like you would with a colleague.
Yes. I imagine in my mind, the ideal co-parenting situation is we have a plan, but we are so aligned that we're also flexible that if, for example, dad has he's got free tickets from work to some event and it's not his night, he can call to say, hey, I've got tickets, you know, and I'd love for the kids to go. And mom says, no problem. Or, oh, I'll
Absolutely.
shift our plans around. So in my mind, I see the ideal is this parenting plan as a template, but our communication lines are so open that we are free to switch it up. That even, you know, I would even go as far as that person can call you where it's their duty and responsibility, and it's not going to turn into a fight of, you see, you're a terrible mother, you can never get anything right.
Absolutely. And you'd be happy to hear that in most parenting plans, that that flexibility is literally written into the plan, that should something change or this one's ill or this one's that, then the first person to contact would be the other parent, then maybe the granny or the auntie or the whatever. So there's so many wonderful flavors that this parenting plan can take. It can be its own tapestry.
So what do we do? I want to go to the opposite extreme of the healthy. I want to go to the extreme of it's non-amicable, as in
Yes.
the separation is non-amicable. And of course, we're not touching on the legal aspects in our discussion
Yes.
today, but we are aware that on the one hand, you guys can do this plan on your own without ever having anybody involved, or there's a mediation or whatever the case may be. We're obviously focusing on the psychological part of it. But in the situation where it's not amicable, it's as bad as when it's dad's turn, the child needs to be dropped off at granny so that dad can pick up granny and they never have to engage. So when it is that difficult, what would you suggest for the parents that are watching in terms of possibly moving forward, even if it's in the smallest step?
Smallest. That's such a good question. Such a good question. Okay. Again, find a way to communicate. Does not have to be phone calls or face-to-face, and I'll explain why. But it could be a text or an email, or it could be one of those apps. You get these divorce apps now.
What?
Yes.
Please tell me about this.
You get an app, oh my word, I must think of the name, where you put in all the info of the child's schedule and the money and everything, and it gets done through the app. There are quite a few of them. I just can't think of the name of the one that, anyway, yeah. So
the divorce is so bad that you need to talk through a divorce app.
Well, it's not only so bad, dear. It can be that this is like a nice way of organizing all the info. It's even for healthy parents. There are apps.
Actually, you're right. You're very right, because now that I think about it, there's certain things that maybe when you sit and do a parenting plan, you never thought about. So when now you have to cross that bridge, it's a nice template that can help you think about things that you may not have considered.
Exactly.
Okay. I think I'm still in shock.
Communicate. By the way, let me just tell all the moms and dads out there, if you're in a situation where it's so conflictual that just seeing the person makes you react, do not feel alone. There is an actual good reason your body is doing that. And we could go into a whole neuroscience discussion about it, but in the nuts and bolts of it, you are still, your whole nervous system is being triggered. So whenever you're seeing that person, or even seeing their phone, as what happened with me in the past, when you see their name on the phone, your whole body can go into a kind of a shock, flight, fight, freeze response, especially if there's been some trauma and some abuse involved. And you can really healthily know that you cannot actually be in their physical presence at this point. And you can just love yourself through that, and know that, all right, I need to get myself into a healed state, so until I can one day, let's give yourself a goal of, I don't know, a few months or weeks or whatever. But believe me, everyone, and I am proof, there is a way through that physiological reaction. Okay.
And I'm
now,
so glad you validated that for everybody that might feel like, how come others can get along and I can't even stand to see this person? It's completely normal.
Yeah. They're literally traumatized by seeing the person in various ways. There are others that, even like in a codependent situation, where seeing them might be like getting your fix, getting your next cigarette, where it gives you a little up and a little, wow, we might get together again. So it can go either way. Our bodies are very amazing, and they can be very, very triggered, especially in the early days, by the split. But I mean, when you see or hear from the person. So initially, take it slow. If you need a mediator with you, if you need a friend to be present, if you need to email in the beginning, take your time if that's what you're needing, because believe me, your children get that response, that when you're triggered and you are finding it really hard to communicate with your ex, they're also going to get that. They're going to notice it. They are so perceptive, most children, even little 5-year-olds nowadays. They can tell,
Very
the rolling of
sensitive.
it must be this one, this tone of voice. A lot of parents think, oh no, he's too young, or she didn't really notice, we didn't shout in front of them. Whew, children are way more perceptive than we are.
So now the question is, in that, while you are trying to take care of yourself and heal yourself, but also keep your child's best interest at heart, as the primary parent or even the non-primary parent, how and what are you communicating to your child, especially if you and this person are not yet on the same page? Do you go by the rule of thumb that be as honest as possible in the most age-appropriate way, or you get the parents who lie to kids, hide the fact that, they'll say daddy's on a business trip, and they drag it out? So what is the accurate approach when it comes
such
to
a valuable question, and I'm so glad you. I actually dedicated a whole little section in my Parent Magic book around honesty and age-appropriate honesty, because these children are so perceptive. I see someone saying here, her son is 5 and he knows everything. Absolutely, and he understands everything. Because children are so perceptive, if you are minimizing or white lying or blatant lying, oh my word, you are setting yourself up for major disaster long term, because the trust in you is going to be broken. I'm not saying, and I'm really not, that woman. No. We do not need that level. We do not need that level of exposure at all. So I'm going to give you a metaphor that usually I find very helpful for children to understand, particularly even if you are talking, if you're talking, not talking, emailing, whatever stage you're at, instead of making yourself more right and the other more wrong, which, remember, I said long ago when we started was a nervous system reaction. I like to use the metaphor of paint colors. In other words, let's imagine dad is one color of paint, or other mom, whatever, dad, and they come up with the color red, and then mom is another color, maybe blue. And then trying to explain that red and blue makes purple, so you're purple. But that does, so daddy in his redness, he forgot to come fetch you, because sometimes in his redness, you know, he also, dad as red color, likes meat and rugby and whatever. And mom in her blue, she has these and these. If the children can see the colors being different, because colors are not right or wrong. So I think that metaphor helps. And even right, if you can sort of expand it almost into teen years, but it's very good for the littlies, that they are this wonderful mix of both. And then you can show them, even in a picture, that the love is still coming from the red paint and the love is still coming from the purple paint. And now you've just got all this love, but the red and the blue are two different colors. They you know, they just like at school, as some sort of analogy that some friends at school you just don't naturally get on with as well as others. Yes, you know, in terms of reasons for splits. So it's not that dad is wrong and mom's right. It's that we're very different. And, you know, sometimes that sort of flavor does things differently to how you would do it.
Yes.
Because that's probably one of the other things that we need to is the different homes. You know, what the rules in the different homes and how the child is treated differently.
So even thinking about, you know, where we were speaking about honesty, the other extreme is that now the one parent is not showing up, not following through, their actions are not aligning with their words. The other parent, in their mind, trying to protect their child, is now lying to the child, saying, Dad, you know, Dad called me to come and pick you up, knowing very well that he didn't show up, and continuing this narrative of making excuses. So protecting the other parent. At what point, you know, because a part of me feels so strongly that children eventually grow up to see exactly what's going on. And it usually happens a lot sooner than we give children credit for. So at what point, because the child might end up resenting you for not having been real with them, but you also as a parent want to protect them and not expose them to whatever's happening with this other person's half-assed effort, if any effort.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I'm with you. I'm with the child-centered approach, where honesty is so vital because of trust. And I have seen so much of this. I have seen moms that are desperately wanting the father to show up, and therefore make all these excuses and almost put him on some kind of pedestal. Oh, and even buy presents on the behalf of the other parent for the child, and the other parent doesn't even know that it's the child's birthday, for instance. We see these situations. Yes.
You know what breaks my heart? It breaks my heart.
It so does.
The intention is beautiful in that you don't want your child to get hurt, but you might be prolonging the inevitable of the shock that...
I think we have to go back to Maya Angelou, don't we? When people show us who they are, believe them. So if we try and put another face on for this other person on behalf of the child and protect the child, we're not actually protecting them. As sad as it is that they're going to get hurt because dad forgot the birthday, or they're going to miss out because he didn't call and he said he was going to, all we can do, instead of judging it, and here's the clincher, this one takes quite a bit of emotional maturity, is to stop yourself from reacting and going into the, oh, he's doing it again. Do your own breathing first, and then come with a reflective, compassionate response. Oh, you're so disappointed. Dad said he was going to come and he didn't. Like, literally show them, name the feeling. Naming the feeling, we always say, you got to name it to tame it. So naming the child's feelings, and then possibly going further with, if they're asking a whole discussion, how come he didn't come? You know, I don't know. You know, often we are so scared as adults to say, I don't know, or to even reflect. I'm also disappointed and sad for you, my love. I wish he did come. But in a way that is not sad. I know. I tell you, it's the hardest part of my work, is trying to help children And I really have had to say in the last couple of years, out of, I don't know, 28 or 20 something years of work in this field, I've had to say to parents, I actually need to work with you first. I will not start working with your child until you guys have got a little bit further down this process. I sometimes have to say that because there often needs to be an outside person who can actually just call them on it. No, you're being unfair. Stop this conflict. Let's go back to putting the child first. And putting the child first is really a commitment. It begins with a choice and a commitment. And yes, it's hard. And yes, you have to have lots of empathy. And yes, you have to be extremely patient with your ex and yourself. And I guess, if it was that easy, you might not have been divorced. So it's pretty much one of the hardest things to do.
So before I jump into my next question, I see that I'm struggling on my side with scrolling up to comments. So if you do see a question on your side, please do let me know so that we can tackle it. For some reason, I can't scroll up on the comments. But what I wanted to now just touch on is, you've spoken about what the parenting plan entails. What do you deal with now if, let's say, you've got this parenting plan and it's going well for a while, but then the other parent starts to falter in the agreement? They were good at the beginning, now they're not being good. We've dealt with how you're going to be honest with your child in an age-appropriate way, but you're not this person's partner. You can't call them and swear it. Like, what can you do?
Yeah, well, if you go through the family advocates offices, the parenting plan can be literally court stamped. I don't know what, there's a term for it. Can be verified by the court.
Mandated.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Court mandated. And then you literally have the law to fall back on. You can then say, oh, well, it's actually not your turn or you're supposed to come. But at the end of the day, you cannot force another person, as we know, to be what we want them to be. We cannot force somebody to, and again, we would have to, being the other parent who maybe is with the child more, we'd have to hold the space, I call it. We'd have to hold space for that, it was like this and now he hasn't come, I'm going to phone again or whatever it is you're trying to, we're going to do the adult things. Think of it again as a business. What would you do in your business work situation if a colleague agreed to XYZ in the AGM or whatever meeting and then didn't go forward? Kind of liken it to that process. You might send them a friendly reminder the first time, give them a few more days. You might send a second, more assertive reminder. And what is your final point of call, your bottom line? And that is a values-based thing.
And then obviously at some point a parent might find themselves having to make the difficult decision of basically abolishing the agreement and doing it on their own in, I'm assuming, very extreme cases.
Yes, there are many cases where that is the unfortunate reality. And that's when it's often that other parent becomes the uncle, more like an uncle. And one is grateful also that especially in South Africa, that the community, the family, the rest of the other beautiful adults in the life of that child can become a kind of a co-parent. So we then draw on the resources that we have. We cannot. No one is an island, ladies. I know you're very strong out there, but nobody is an island. And South African woman, you're the strongest, I must tell you. But nobody is an island. We all need support. And whether that support has to come from your parents, your friend, your long-lost uncle who's going to help you financially, find the support you need. Because when you are supported, because you will be a better parent.
It's so interesting that some of these situations where one parent basically opts out of parenting and then his family continues to step in, and then you'll have this child who is close to the paternal family and they bump into their dad at family events. It's just like,
Absolutely. We have a participant saying my brother became the stable role model, male role model, sorry, for my son. And you know, it's amazing. There's just I see all these comments. I'm going to have to put my glasses on and scroll back. But a lot of people are saying how hard it is, and they don't know what they would have done, what they would have told what they had to tell their son one day. It's really difficult. And, you know, take heart. The love is what sees us through. The love for our children is so huge that with the right bit of support, with these principles of minimizing harm, enhancing the strengths, we can go very far, very, very far.
In terms of how do you manage, now let's go back to the co-parenting where everybody, you know, the two parents are putting an agreement together. How do you now start including any third parties in your co-parenting plan? For example, I can imagine many schools have to deal with feuding parents where, you know, mom is the one that picks up the child, but dad decides, I'm going to come and pick up my son. And then it's awkward for the school to have to be like, okay, well, you're the parent and you're on the form, so we're letting you take the child. And then mom arrives, her child is gone. How do we manage all those other third parties, be it granny, be it the school, after school activities, into the parenting plan?
Yeah, well, there are actually schools, of course, that are very aware of this scenario. And in cases, for instance, of violence or abusive situations within the family, the school would be informed of the parenting plan and the certain section where it says, you know, only the mother or the granny may fetch the child, not the parent, or these days, and that kind of thing. And, you know, on the level of the conflict side, that is the side that is the hardest, because when the parents, and I was so devastated by this a few years back, research shows that the biggest factor in the child's recovery after a split is not therapy, is not how much financial support, nothing, not how much access they get with each parent. It is the level of conflict or nature of relationship post the split between the parents. Wow. It is between the parents. It is everything. And of course, that is the hardest part, because if it was good, you probably wouldn't have split. So that conflict, if you can start to manage that in more and more business-like ways, I'm going to go back to that metaphor, you're going to get further and you're going to have a much healthier child, because the impact on the child, there are many, there are, I just want to maybe go through a few of the reactions to conflict that we often see. So just a heads up, if you're seeing this in your child, it's because more than likely they're picking up on your conflict. Many children act out negatively, so they bring up, they start going into negative behavior syndromes from a range of things, tantrum throwing, you know, all sorts of things, demanding in class, being the class clown, being the opposite, going into withdrawal symptoms. So all sorts of behaviors can change because of the conflict between divorcing parents. And then there's the children that become the scapegoat. Oh, no, mommy, it wasn't dad, it was my fault. I just didn't tell dad that you were going to meet him at this, you know, horrible. And then they're the ones, bless, who become the mediators. And they try to mediate between the parents. But mom, how would you feel if dad just came for that bit, and then I'll ask dad if he can come to the party on that side? And you know, it's a terrible reaction.
And that's a burden a child should never have to carry.
We also call it parentified children, which also happens in a lot of substance abuse, where they become a parent to their own parents. And then of course there are those children who withdraw emotionally from either both parents or one of them. Often the one that they're sensing more conflict, they just withdraw. They don't want to go to the parent anymore. They just shut down. And then, of course, we also have the children that side with one parent. And that's very damaging too, but they're siding because the conflict is too intense, not necessarily because they like you more and they think you're right. The conflict is too hard. And then, of course, last but not least, they play us. They play the one against the other. But if dads ask, I'm allowed to watch this Netflix
Manipulate.
until time.
Yes,
So those are
yes,
some of the
yes.
very common responses to conflict, to the parental conflict that happens post-divorce. And of course, you know, I really don't want to minimize. I don't want to make it all about the child, but the parents themselves are going through divorce brings on more stress to an adult life generally. So I really don't want to underestimate that. I also mentioned the nervous system earlier. Please, 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 people out there, no matter how long ago your split was, just be very self-compassionate. Do whatever you can to get over it, emotionally and psychologically. It's one thing to physically be apart and to say, I'm divorced. But not all of us are emotionally and psychologically divorced. We're still living in the emotional world of the other.
Would you advise, and we don't have that much time left, but would you advise that as far as possible, each parent should try and keep the rules the same in each of their homes? And this is taking into consideration that the parents will likely move on, have new partners, and maybe the new partners also come with their own children. And now you're trying to maintain a consistency.
Yes, well, it is obviously the ideal in terms of the child having a very great sense of routine and stability, which builds emotional security. If they can agree with the same kind of rules in each home, that's going to be amazing. It very seldom happens. So then you have to go back to the paint pots. Okay, well, in Dad's house, you're allowed this, but in my house, we have these rules. And you could even put up sets of rules on the fridge. Remember, whose house is this? And you ask them back. Whose house is it? And of course, we didn't talk about the changeover effect. Every time from the one parent to the other, it's very normal to have a day or two, depending on how many days access, of being out of sorts when you've come back from the other parent.
Wow.
Yes.
So what does that look like in the child? Do you mean like they're experiencing an adjustment period, but as a parent, what are you seeing? What are you witnessing in the
It's their
changeover
adjustment,
effect?
but the parent will see a more tired child, a child who's acting out more, a child who suddenly refusing your rules, but normally they're fine. And this is often just the adjustment from the one home to the other. So we want to make it as effortless and easy as we can for them.
Yes, and I mean, obviously, it must be really difficult. I remember being in school, seeing all my friends who had divorced parents as teenagers, now needing to visit the one parent the one weekend and basically living out of a suitcase. Would you say it's accurate to say that some kids completely lack the sense of stability because now they have a room here, a room there? Oh, I need this thing, but I forgot it at Dad's. It would be so much easier if I just stayed in one place. Why can't Dad visit us here?
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's why every single case is different. And some families do opt for that, where it's primary residence the whole time with the one parent. The other parent has certain access days where they take them away, but they bring them back at night. There's all sorts of very creative solutions nowadays. And yes, you know, definitely for children, if they could have ideally almost like similar things in the different homes that you don't have to go between, that's going to cost a lot of money and it's not always possible. But otherwise, a plan, a little checklist on the fridge when it's a day before Dad's, the changeover. Oh, we got to go to our checklist. And then it's, you know, the soccer boots, the Koza book, the Afrikaans are all that needs to go in. You know, absolutely anything is possible in terms of security as long as we prepare the child with words ahead of time and we ask back and we normalize and help them to cope with these changes.
So now in closing, I mean, obviously our conversation here is limited, but you do some amazing work. You are hosting something tomorrow. Please tell us about it.
Yes, it's 6 sessions online discipline made easy training, which I'm very proud of because in all the years of same things to parents, and even in my book, I find that parents not often are supported enough in trying to learn new tools. So I created last year sometime the 6-session program, and it goes from next Thursday evening, then it's a morning the next week, then it's back to Thursday evening. So it's 6 sessions that are live, and the participants get to really learn. And because I find discipline a big challenge in divorce as well. Some parents split because they can't get on, they can't agree around disciplining. So yeah, that training is 6 sessions live. But if you can't do any of the lives, you're free to be part of you get to be part of a Facebook, closed Facebook group as well. And in those 6 sessions, I really support and help you through the challenge of disciplining today's kids. So that's starting tomorrow evening at 8 p.m. And people can just email Carol at raisingkidspositively.com and just say in the subject matter discipline course or something, and I will send the info. And yes, it's something that you can keep for life, because the recordings, you can just always watch again and again. And yes, I also have obviously my own Facebook group and Insta group, which is also Raising Kids Positively. And for those who can have the time to read, my whole parenting book has got a whole lot of little mini exercises and sort of visually easy to read, so that you can open that book at any point and get something out of it, alongside my children's self-esteem game, which is also a really beautiful, I call it the monopoly of, like a feelings monopoly. It's called Inner Magic, the self-esteem game. So that's all on my website at raisingkidspositively.com.
So raisingkidspositively.com, and of course, everybody follow Carol, Raising Kids Positively. This journey of parenting, it is continuous. We're all growing. We're all learning. Just to wrap up the co-parenting discussion, and just to echo what you said, is you aren't alone. And the journey is going to never be straightforward and simple. Things change, dynamics change. Your co-parent that you're parenting with, his or her life will change. She will evolve and change. But I want to leave it on the note that I'm so hopeful that in this era of being woke and aware, we now are more interested in finding out about our children's well-being and the impact, and not just waiting for them to be 18 and telling us how much they resent us. We now are taking such an active role in being conscious about how we're not damaging and traumatizing them, and that in itself gives me hope. And just to echo as well what you said, Carol, is sometimes when the other parent is not showing up, it might actually be a blessing in disguise. You have everything that it takes to continue to do the job. Use the support around you. Ask for the help. Don't be afraid. And if you find yourself in a situation where you need to involve the law, please use the family courts. They are there, and they are the ones that can also speak on the best interests of the child, be it maintenance, which also have their own courts, be it access, be it parenting plan. Use the social workers. The tools are there. You don't have to suffer alone.
Absolutely.
Carol, thank you so much. Head over raisingkidspositively.com and make sure you follow Carol's Instagram as well. And to Batswadi Magazine, thank you so much for hosting these conversations. It has been so enlightening. If you missed any of the others, head over to the Instagram page and catch up on this wonderful series. From myself, it's been such a joy to be a part of this with all of you. But have a very good night and happy parenting, wholesome parenting, healthy parenting, loving parenting to each and every one of you. Have a good night.
Good night.